In Cleaver, I own What a Picture Photography with my brother, and we day-to-day work is weddings, pets, horses, and in my case, American football. I'm the area coordinator for the West Midlands for Remember My Baby, and that involves having to work with hospitals to try and not only get new hospitals on board, but maintain a working relationship with the hospitals we're already with, and to look after the welfare of the volunteers in the area.
Okay, I'm Norman from Ruby Studios. I've been in photography about 40 years, and initially as a press photographer, and then ran a commercial studio through the 80s. And now I specialise in portraits, families, children, and glamour makeover sort of sessions.
How did you hear about Remember My Baby?
I bumped into one of the co-founders at a newborn photography show back in 2014. She told me what it was all about, and given that I'd spent most of my working life dealing with the worst that life had got to throw at us, it sounded ideal to go back and do something positive for people rather than the negative side of things that the job entails.
I can't remember now. Where did I hear about them? Oh, yeah, hang on. I heard of them through one of the photography shows, and got chatting, and felt that it was something I'd like to get involved in.
So in terms of training, what have you done for this charity?
I've done, including having to go to a session on the way here this morning, I've now done 49 sessions since I actually joined in 2015. My initial training was a training day seminar going through how to approach families, how to handle families, how to position babies, and a bit of networking with other photographers to see how they approach the same thing, so that we pick up ideas from each other.
The training sessions that I've done shadowing another photographer, but of course it's not that far removed from what I did throughout my photography career anyway. I was a press photographer back in the late 70s, early 80s, so I was kind of taught to think on my feet and come away with a series of images that were usable. So it kind of teaches you to get images in difficult situations.
Did you have any challenges in the field, either physical or emotional?
Yes, a lot of them. It's more emotional than physical challenges that we meet, because each family is dealing with the grieving process in a different way. Some folks can be almost obnoxious with people. They don't mean to be. It's just the stress they're under at the time. It's very much, what do we do? This has happened to us, but I don't know how to deal with it. So it's always the trying to help people sort of resolve their emotions as well. We're an outside person, so they probably feel it's easier to talk to us than to people closer.
Yeah, one of the hardest sessions I did was mother was actually in a coma when I arrived, so she was already quite ill anyway, and so when she gave birth it was touch and go whether she would make it. The baby subsequently passed away, and Mum was still unconscious when I was there, so it got to the stage where shortly after I arrived, a priest arrived as well, and I don't think anybody realised whether she would make it or not. As it happened, the outcome was good, and she pulled through. But that was probably the most challenging session I think I've done.
Do you think that the charity is doing a lot for the families?
Yeah, at the last check, we're fast approaching 2,000 sessions since the charity was formed in August 2014. There are lots of parts of the country where we are desperately in need of photographers, because it makes sense to have a team in place before we start approaching hospitals to offer a service. I don't believe in offering a service until I know that we can resolve any time they call us. We can provide them with somebody, and we're gradually getting there. But it's lots of people show interest, but don't go beyond the initial interest stage and follow through and actually take up a volunteering role.
Hundreds of families have benefited from this now, and it kind of gives you a warm feeling inside to know that you've done something just to make somebody's life a little bit easier.
Do you have any stories that are memorable to share with us right now?
I guess the most memorable one was almost a couple of years ago now. We got a call came in on a mid-morning on a Friday from a family who were up in Bangor in North Wales. We don't cover any of the hospitals up there because we've got no volunteers there at the moment, and the nearest volunteer, if they were available, would have been 75 miles away. We hadn't got anybody available. I don't say no. So I travelled up there, and I've got a very young couple, and the grandparents had only had a new baby about 6 months ago, so the family were quite emotional about it all, but they were absolutely over the moon with what we did for them, and I've actually stayed friends with the family. So we had the good news recently that they'd just had a newborn.
Do you feel like the charity needs more exposure?
We should. In terms of getting the word out to potential mothers, it's very difficult because you can't really go out and advertise us as such, because we don't want to be sort of saying, well, we don't want anything to happen to your baby, but the big push we need is within the photography community to actually find a way of getting through to photographers that it is not the frightening thing that they imagine it to be. It is a photo session whereby you are actually changing people's lives by what we produce, because that gives them that memory to hold on to. That baby throughout the pregnancy has been a part of the family, and traditional wisdom was always that effectively it was dismissed if it was a stillbirth, whereas now we're moving towards recognising that the baby is a part of the family.
Well, yeah, it's still not very well known. It'd be great to be able to get word out there and be able to get more press coverage, I guess, to raise awareness of what we do. It's really valuable when you hear the feedback from parents. It is really valuable, I think. Yeah.
And lastly, what do you think is the overall objective for this charity?
To create a lasting memory of images of their little angel.
We want to be available to every maternity unit in the country, and I would like us to have sufficient photographers available that they don't get called out too often, but we can service every request that we receive.
Amazing.